Welcome to the final session in our People Development Series. Our goal in this series is to offer a new perspective. We believe it is very important to change our approach to people from one of management to one of growth facilitation. This series offers practical ways to shift our perspective and our approach. It seems everyone talks about leadership, and good leadership is important for organizational success. There are a lot of books and programs to help people become better leaders. So why do so many organizations still struggle under less than effective leadership? Today, we want to give some practical ways to tackle leadership development. This is not an exhaustive workshop for sure, but our goal is to at least scratch the surface of how you may be able to start thinking about this very important topic in a different way. So let's start by introducing ourselves. Many of you now know us from previous webinars or from working with us. Wes has been integral in helping us develop our humaculture philosophy and our approach, and may get distracted occasionally if someone leaves the gate unlatched and has heard of cattle get out of the pasture. He assures us that the gate is latched today.
Well, in all the years we've had of Zoom and Teams, I have not seen anybody have to go wrangle the cattle back into the pasture. So that was a first. So Steve serves on the board of a charity where they apply humaculture principles to fund projects that support economic developments and generate sustainable revenue streams to fund needed healthcare for mothers and babies in Uganda.
So Steve and Christi mentioned the cattle because a couple of weeks ago we were together in a Teams meeting, and I was in my home office, and I did in fact see some cows running past my my window. So someone had left the gate open, and we did have to put some of our cattle back up. So as I've mentioned in previous webinars, Christi is a world traveler. She loves to travel, and she's been continuing her globe-trotting adventures recently with a 2-week trip to Italy. She has more than 30 years of experience in people and leadership development and traditional human resources work.
Thank you, Wes. So thank you all for joining us today. We encourage you to send us questions. Please put those in the Q&A section as opposed to the chat function, because that's what we can see. It's easier for us as presenters to see it in that structure. So we know your time is valuable. We're going to keep ourselves on time. So let's get started.
So Wes, how is leadership development related to our 7 dimensions of humaculture?
Well, for those that have joined us before, you know, we always stress in each of our webinars that every dimension of the 7 dimensions of humaculture has an impact on all the others. In fact, that's the idea behind humaculture. The dimensions provide us a much better way to understand organizations, and they also give us a way to make decisions about an organization or business in a more holistic and effective way. Today's webinar really gets at the heart of what humaculture is all about. More than anyone else associated with the organization, leaders must see the big picture. So when a leader understands the nature and purpose of an organization and the interaction of all the other dimensions, it's easy and natural to adopt a growth facilitation mindset. So today's webinar will help illustrate the power of the 7 dimensions and how we use them. So again, this really gets at the essence of what humaculture is all about.
How is that?
Well, let's discuss leadership development as you can see here by considering 3 specific areas of why we're here today. So the breadth of perspective of a leader, the decision-making effectiveness of a leader, and how leadership vacuums can create toxic environments and potentially cause confusion. Particularly when leaders lack sufficient breadth or depth of knowledge, operations can suffer. And even if those leaders possess excellent leadership qualities across the board in different areas, leaders sometimes possess those multiple leadership expertise areas, but they don't have the ability to make really strong or effective decisions. So developing experience, honing leadership qualities, both of these are important. But either of these can also create leadership vacuums, and those lead to toxic environments, ineffectual environments within an organization. The 7 dimensions of humaculture provide us that overarching framework to assure leadership development programs build breadth as well as qualities in the future leaders, but as well in current leaders that might exist in positions today. And leaders who understand how each of the 7 dimensions work and how they impact or influence the other dimensions are better prepared to lead the organization to greater success overall. Organizational development programs that are designed to reflect all 7 dimensions are less likely to miss any of those key areas of leadership development.
So a leadership development program rooted, pun intended, in the 7 dimensions will assure leaders are taught to understand how the environment affects the choices available to the organization, or how the design of jobs made available in the dimension of real assets impacts the operational effectiveness of the organization.
Exactly, Steve.
Well, that's great and really helpful. So let's talk about these issues in more detail.
Okay, but before we jump into that, let's think a little bit about our prior webinar in which we addressed manager development. We used this little cartoon to ask the question, is there a difference between a manager and a leader? And we said the answer is a resounding yes. A manager exhibits possibly at times great leadership qualities, and these management roles may be in fact a good training ground for leaders. And sometimes managers will take leadership roles even if they're not technically in a leadership role. But the manager is primarily focused on results and assuring employees have what they need to get the job done and that the job is done, etc. As John Maxwell says, though, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. So a leader is all about establishing direction, pulling people together, getting them to move in the same direction, etc.
Exactly. Our purpose today is to address effective leadership development. Although leadership development should be part of employee development and manager development, an effective leadership program will go beyond what is discussed in our previous webinars when we discussed employee and manager development.
In leadership development and lacking this broad perspective is something that I've seen many times in my career. In fact, we actually talked about this as Wes indicated in a previous webinar where we talked about the star employee syndrome. And someone's outstanding in sales and marketing. They have the ability, they're promoted into this leadership position. And this person knows the customer service aspect of the environment really well. She knows exactly what products or services the customers want or need. But does she fully understand the operational requirements and the overall picture? In other words, what it takes to deliver that product or service. And often we would have to say, maybe not. So she was a star employee, but she may struggle in this new leadership role because she has a very narrow view of that organization.
Yes, I've seen this often as well. And this tends to happen for several reasons. When you get an employee or manager that does a good job in their current role, but they may not understand what's important to the rest of the organization more broadly, but is still promoted to a leadership role because the organization lacks an effective leadership development program to identify and develop those leaders in that broader skill capability. When an organization only fills leadership positions from within the organization, there may also be a void of an outside perspective, again resulting in a myopic view.
I think that's true overall. And when an organization only hires leaders from outside the organization, it creates this incredible frustration internally for employees who are actually looking for that career path, whether it's upward or laterally. It may undermine that development of an intentional culture.
Yeah, and we've seen many real world examples of this in the organizations we've worked with. You'll often see people from a sales and marketing perspective have been in those roles, been very successful in those roles. They're promoted to leadership roles, and then suddenly they view, legal and IT, or maybe even before they get there, legal and IT, for instance, as they're being in the business of sales prevention. And there are also oftentimes you'll see people from other areas in the organization move to a leadership role. So, for instance, someone from finance maybe so focused on the cost of things that they fail to understand the value of taking risk and the opportunities for innovation and how people feel when their organization, when they have an idea that their organization stifles.
Mhm.
Yeah, and leaders who do not or cannot view the organization through the lens of all different roles have a difficult time understanding the perspectives of all those different roles.
That's right, Steve. And so let's shift a little bit to talk through that decision-making structure.
Sure. Well, several leadership qualities are important for good decision making: courage, collaboration, innovation, for example. Leaders may fail to make effective decisions because many of the necessary qualities are missing or have not been cultivated. But simply possessing the necessary qualities does not mean great decisions are made.
That's exactly right. So even when someone has many leadership qualities, the leadership development program still may not teach a leader how to make effective decisions. And decision making is a skill that should absolutely be taught because we believe it can be learned. But the organization might not also have a good structure within which to make decisions. Either way, it's important for the leadership development program to address decision making and how we teach leaders to do that.
Okay, so we've looked at this problem of a myopic view, and we've looked at the issues that result if we don't have quality decision making or we have a lack of decision making. So let's think about these two examples of potential leadership deficiencies and the leadership vacuum that can create and the impact that it has on an organization. How would that look?
Well, leadership vacuums exist when those in leadership roles don't convey a common goal and lack the qualities necessary to be a leader, or experience and acquired skills to be an effective leader.
Regardless of the reason, the outcome can still be a toxic environment. So in a leadership vacuum, you've got to think about multiple things here. Specifically, people are going to make up their own stories. So if you don't communicate to me in an organization about what I'm A, supposed to do, or B, what I'm supposed to do within the larger organization, I'm going to go ahead and do my job without understanding that connection between the mission and the vision. Customer experiences can then therefore be inconsistent, and many of those interactions with customers are then negative. Employees blame leaders, right? We get the pointing. Employees blame leaders, leaders blame employees, and then one functional area blames another. And now we have disagreement and discontent and dysfunction truly between siloed areas in an organization.
So, Christi, you kind of added another leadership deficiency that is important to talk about, and that's communication. So even if a leader is otherwise very good at many things, they have great qualities, they're able to make decisions, et cetera, but they fail to understand the importance of keeping those lines of communication open with all employees. You still have those people making decisions in their own area. You have the silo effect. And that often creates, when it's not well coordinated, decisions for other areas. So you have a real downstream effect there. And sometimes those decisions aren't aligned because the leader has not communicated them with the overall vision, mission, and values of the organization. And that very often undermines the business strategy, I think.
So leadership development, like all other topics we have addressed in this series, must be focused on helping leaders grow and thrive in all aspects required of effective leaders. It must also include a plan to identify and transition the right people into those leadership roles.
And that is exactly the point of this series, Steve.
Yes, growth facilitation means working within and throughout all 7 dimensions.
So let's dive into some examples of what we believe now strong leaders need as a foundation for success.
Okay. So let's start with the issue of the myopic view. So what we really need are well-rounded leaders, and well-rounded leaders are those who possess a diverse range of qualities, but also acquired skills that they align with the 7 dimensions, they understand them, and this allows them to effectively lead and inspire others and achieve organizational goals. So again, we need leaders, as the illustration here we have shows, who see the big picture.
Well, perhaps the most important goal of leadership development is to help leaders see the 7 dimensions as simultaneously important and dynamically interactive. Think of a person piloting an airplane. The pilot must understand the plane's functions and how it interacts with the environment. The pilot must think in 3 dimensions and adjust to rapid environmental changes like wind gusts or wind shear. Similarly, an effective leader must be aware of how employees will act or react to certain pay and benefit structures, as well as how those employee behaviors will affect customer experience. The effective leader must understand how to employ the company's real assets, as well as how to assure the brand is understood and well respected. In other words, the effective leader must think 7-dimensionally.
Yes, and thinking and acting 7-dimensionally requires certain qualities as well as experience and acquired skills. So an effective leadership development program is going to do 3 things from our perspective. Identify those people in the organization who possess the necessary qualities to become a leader or need the development and the support, right? Build and hone those qualities, focus in on what they're doing well, identify what the opportunities for improvement are, and then assure those who are on that leadership track and that they gain the experience and skill in a cross-functional way within the organization, aligned with those 7 dimensions of humaculture.
Okay, so I have to ask, and Steve, go ahead and go to the next slide, next photo. So I have to ask, when this photo was up earlier, how many of you noticed the goat in the lower right-hand corner of the photo we're using to illustrate this point? The first time that Steve and Christi saw this graphic, they both told me that they didn't even notice the goat. They looked at the one that was in focus and said, "I don't think there was a goat in the other one." So that's a pretty good illustration of this myopic view problem that potentially exists.
That's right. When we came to this slide after Wes built this out, I was like, wow, I didn't even see that goat the first time, which is interesting. Being from Chicago and a Cubs fan, the curse of the Billy Goat certainly has a unique connotation. A leader with a myopic perspective that misses the goat in the business may be missing the very critical elements keeping the business from achieving its potential. Let's hope it doesn't take your organization 108 years to identify and address the goat in your business.
Well, and from New England on this side, goat has a very different meaning for us, right? So it's not an actual goat, it's the greatest of all time. And of course, that's Tom Brady for us here in New England. So, he exhibited exceptional leadership qualities, including the ability to see the entire field, not be narrow. He could find multiple receivers downfield and almost really always could find those open people. And everyone can see how that enabled him to achieve success both in New England and then almost immediately in Tampa Bay.
Well, I guess if you're going to talk about that type of goat, I think of Michael Jordan in the same vein. He also exhibited great leadership qualities, but it wasn't until Phil Jackson helped him understand what it meant to be a leader and how he needed to make everyone around him better that he was able to truly become the GOAT of basketball. In reality, Phil Jackson was the GOAT leader that made both Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant the exceptional players that they ultimately became.
And certainly decision-making, in addition to having a broad view, helped us with that. So let's talk a little bit about how we develop leaders into better decision makers.
Okay, so I think what we're talking about here is that some people possess certain qualities that make them better at decision making than others. But even if those people who are really good at that may lack success if they're part of organizations in which the structure itself impedes effective decision making, or they've never been taught to make good decisions. So effective leadership development builds decision making qualities, helps leaders and future leaders acquire skills and all of the experience really that's necessary to support the effective decision making, but then also reinforces that in the right cultural environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why effective leadership development programs must do three things really well, specifically. Identify, again, people who demonstrate those qualities of effective decision-making, goes with broad perspective, right? They
Mhm.
must have that balance of intuition and that is guided by data, trust but verify, creating opportunities for those people to work, again, in those cross-functional teams, learning to collaborate, learning to gain a proper broad perspective in order to help decisions that impact the entire organization. And lastly, I think we must be able to provide training and development opportunities that address a multitude of decision-making levels. Some people may have a strategic level decision that needs to be made. Others, it might be a routine decision that needs to be made. Is it a group decision, an individual decision? Is it an organizational or a departmental? Is it economic, or are there no economics, that are lent, that need to be considered in this space? And it's just a decision. Go ahead and make that decision.
It seems like it would be important to not only understand the different types of decisions, but where on the spectrum each type of decision may be.
Mhm.
Rarely is a decision one-dimensional or all one side to the other.
Right. And I suspect that anybody watching us is thinking that, well, sometimes I have to make easy decisions and sometimes I have to make really hard decisions. So you have to do that in a cultural way. So coming from healthcare, where lives are put on the line every day, the growing trend is to focus on creating what's called a just culture. And many of you may have heard of this just culture structure before. People won't necessarily be punished for making an error, for reporting a failure. In
Mhm.
fact, aside from intentional sabotage or wrongdoing, a just culture is about safety, passion about safety. It's about making sure that we're fair and equitable in how we talk about an error or a concern. It's oriented toward learning and clear communication. And it has systems in place designed to manage and support that behavioral choice. What happened? What should have happened? What needs to happen in the future? And again, constantly seeking to improve those results.
I agree. Well, we can have an entire series on this topic. A just culture really requires an aligned and healthy culture, a strong people strategy, including aspects like leadership development, but also the employee and manager development as well, and embeds the principles of a high reliability organization into everything you do.
Yeah, I think something that occurs to me as well is that it's actually encouraging employees to want to share errors and learn from them, as opposed to try to hide them. So that culture actually encourages that. So let's look at these examples, the examples we've given here of the developing a broad perspective of the decision making, and discuss how to address these leadership vacuums that we've talked about.
Great. Well, without effective, intentional leadership development, leadership vacuums are likely to exist in most organizations. To fill or avoid these leadership vacuums, intentional leadership development must identify potential leaders who have important leadership qualities like good intuition, decision-making skills, are open to other perspectives, but also discerning. A second, help leaders and prospective leaders hone and develop those qualities through continuous learning. All readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. Or I should say, all readers aren't leaders, but all leaders are readers.
There you go.
Provide a path to gain broad experience and acquired skills to develop leaders who are broad strategic thinkers and are also aware of their shortcomings. And fourth, continuously reinforce the development of those qualities and acquired skills that are necessary for a strong leader.
In other words, leadership development should address all 7 dimensions of humaculture.
That's right, Christi. Today, we are primarily discussing developing the next generation of leaders. I have found that it can be very difficult for current leaders to change. However, when working with current leaders to develop the leadership development program, there can be a sentinel effect if they are introspective enough to consider how they exhibit the qualities and skills the training program is designed to address.
Yeah, exactly. Now, remember Steve's airplane pilot analogy. Like that pilot, a leader who's aware of the influence of all the 7 dimensions is going to naturally adjust to things as they change within one or more of the other dimensions. So leadership development programs that reflect the 7 dimensions are much more likely to help leaders and prospective leaders avoid those myopic views, make more effective decisions, avoid the leadership vacuums, and really what we're going for here is thriving organizations. And how do we get there? So as always, we believe it's important to consider what we call life's little shortcuts, heuristics. All of us use them, whether we realize it or not. And it's important to understand how they operate in our lives.
Yeah, well, we believe you got to always think about the behavioral implications of everything you're doing. So we'd like to talk about 2 enablers and 2 inhibitors. So these heuristics, they can either enable us to make better, more effective decisions if we design things right, or inhibit effective decisions. So let's think about how employees are likely to respond to leadership development efforts.
And let's start with those enablers.
Sure. The first 2 on the slide are green. They're examples of heuristics used to facilitate growth. People seek the status of a leadership position, so be sure employees view that leadership development as the best way to achieve the leadership roles they seek and make it meaningful in their achievement of those leadership roles. Similarly, scarcity creates demand. Again, be sure employees view the leadership development program as a means to the scarce number of leadership roles. And if you've got multiple people that are in your program with only a select few actually getting selected for the leadership role, it will help leverage that scarcity bias.
And that makes a lot of sense. So if the enablers are increasing success, tell us a little bit about those inhibitors.
Yeah, the 2 in red are examples of how heuristics may inhibit growth facilitation. First is regret aversion. Some people are afraid to make a decision for fear of making a poor one. An effective leadership program can help employees overcome regret aversion by teaching them how to make better decisions that they can feel good about and experience success as they grow and build to bigger decisions for the leadership role. People also tend to be short-sighted and often put off decisions, which may be partly due to inertia, the complexity of the decision-making process, and the present bias. To overcome myopic procrastination, identify and develop leaders to overcome this bias by repeatedly providing a limited time window for action, along with scarcity of available rewards, opportunities, positions, so it becomes ingrained in them that they need to take that broader perspective and make a decision more quickly. But also create expectations to foresee implications beyond their current role. And this can be done through multi-departmental, cross-function teams where they're making strategic decisions to support the leadership team.
So we use these little shortcuts every day, as Steve said, whether we know it or not, but we use it sometimes to limit our opportunity and growth. It causes people to leave an organization.
That's right. Heuristics can be a powerful tool to help the organization succeed or fail if you don't understand and use them properly. Wes, can you summarize for us?
Sure. So we've used some examples of leadership within the organization, less than effective decision-making skills. Either of these examples can result in leadership vacuums, and that will often result in a very toxic workplace. So effective leadership development reflects the 7 dimensions of humaculture, as we've discussed, and helps leaders and prospective leaders develop that broad perspective. Effective leadership development also includes intentional ways to develop decision-making skills. So when we do these things, if we do them well and we address other areas of leadership, potential leadership deficiencies, then the organization is not hindered by leadership vacuums, and we can avoid toxic cultures and have thriving organizations. So Steve, I think we've been discussing what to do next and where we're going to head from here. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're planning for the next webinar or the direction we're taking? Sure.
So first, I want to let you know that we post a replay of all our webinars on our blog, on our website. This is the 5th webinar in this series. We're still considering topics for our next series. We're thinking about looking at the organizational dimension or perhaps the rewards dimension. We're also considering a podcast format. We we are interested in your feedback and input. So let us know in the chat or the Q&A what topics are most interesting to you. All right, looks like we've got about a minute left. We'll take one question. Let's see. So let's do this one. What are the strategies to help someone moving into a leadership role to see the bigger picture? Who would like to take that?
I can take that, Steve. It's an interesting perspective, right? But one strategy would be to implement, when you implement your cohesive or comprehensive leadership development program, it reflects the 7 dimensions. And leaders who think in that 7-dimensional space will more naturally be able to see that big picture. And if your organization doesn't have that leadership development program yet, when a person's promoted or moves laterally within the organization, it's important to make sure they have someone to take them under their wing, someone that they can ask questions of. We all know, oh, I have a stupid question. Well, there are no stupid questions. And we need to feel safe as developing leaders to ask someone, those questions without any potential consequences. And, another strategy is to tie at least a portion of performance and promotion to overall organizational outcomes. So in other words, align incentives to help assure that leaders and prospective leaders have incentives and they learn to see that big picture.
Yeah, thanks, Christi. I'd like to just suggest also incorporating into your formal or informal leadership development program projects that go beyond their current scope. Have them serve on cross-functional strategic projects that require them to work with and interview people in other areas where they have to learn and understand other perspectives and how that impacts the strategic recommendations.
Absolutely.
I think we're out of time now. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. We hope you find this helpful. We would love to hear from you, to learn more from you about your specific challenges or circumstances. So we'd like to thank you and make sure to complete the survey you receive at the conclusion of this session. Please complete the survey and share your thoughts with us. Let us know what you think we should use for a format and what content we should cover in our next series. And let us know what you like or what can be better. As you've probably noticed, if you've been joining us over the course of this series or our prior series, we've adapted some of your ideas as we have gone through the series. Thanks, and make it a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.